right, everyone. Welcome. My name is Katrina VanHuss, and this is my beloved husband, Otis Fulton. We are with Turnkey for Good, and as we age, we've begun to do more and more pro bono work, which we're enjoying very much. And one of the things that people have asked us for a lot is the psychology of asking and giving. I think what's driving this is that more and more our boards, our volunteers outside our programs, they want to be able to solicit funds for the nonprofit, but they feel anxious about it. So what we're going to talk about today are ways to help your leadership volunteers become less anxious. So with that, Otis is a social psychologist, just so you know. He's not like a dentist poking around in your mouth. That is not actually a dentist. He is a dentist, metaphorically speaking. So he's going to talk to us about how we respond when we have to ask and when we're asked to give. Otis?
So, one of the hurdles organizations that depend on fundraising have to overcome, is people's aversion to asking others for money. And, it turns out it isn't just money. People are loath to ask others for anything, to give up seats on a bus, to fill out a questionnaire. So we think it's about money, but it's really not about the money at all. And the root of our hesitancy is this fear of being rejected. We're all influenced by what psychologists refer to as the egocentric bias. That means we're so concerned with our anxiety about making the ask on behalf of an organization, that we're oblivious to what the other person we're asking is feeling. And something that's been shown to reduce this anxiety around fundraising is to reframe it as storytelling. So rather than insisting people learn a bunch of facts and figures and talking points about the organization, just, ask your staff, board members, fundraisers to tell you how they first got involved with the mission or your organization, and then ask them to tell a story about why they stay involved. That's it. So here's the formula for a great ask. It's just two sentences and a question. That's it. You don't need a lot of information. So one of the organizations I support is the Richmond SPCA. So here's what an ask for the Richmond SPCA might look like. This year I'm raising funds for the Richmond SPCA. Richmond SPCA is a no-kill shelter that adopts as many as 100 animals a week. Can I count on you to support Richmond SPCA? So that's a simple ask, but I'll tell you, research tells us that changing just two words will result in twice as many people saying yes. In other words, as psychologists say, it will double the compliance. So instead of asking someone, will support the Richmond SPCA, what you want to ask them is if they'll support, will you support me? And can I count on you to support me? So why does changing two words make such a huge difference? And in order to answer that question, think about what happens when people get a request from somebody else. So, you're thinking about what you're asking. I'm asking the person for money. Will this person give me the money? How will they feel about it? What you're not doing is thinking about what's going on in their heads. If someone came up to them and said, hey, I'm supporting the Richmond SPCA, would you be willing to help me? Now, if you're sitting there, it'd be hard to say no, right? If you knew this person, especially, it'd be awkward. What would you even say? And so people often go ahead and agree. So that brings us kind of to the question, how persuasive are you anyway? So let's do a little experiment. Let's say you want to raise $1,000 for the SPCA from friends and family. How many people do you think you'd have to ask to raise $1,000? Well, that's exactly the question that Cornell University social psychologist Vanessa Bonds wanted to answer. And in her well-named book, You Have More Influence Than You Think, How We Underestimate Our Powers of Persuasion and Why It Matters, she describes a study she did with a volunteer fundraiser at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. They have a thing called the Team in Training event. And she asked the fundraisers how many people they'd have to solicit donations from to meet whatever fundraising goal they'd set for themselves. So, for example, a fundraiser whose goal was to, in the thousands of dollars, might say they'd have to ask 50 people to donate in order to hit their goal. And what she found was that people tended to overshoot the mark by double. So someone estimating they'd have to make 50 asks to meet their goal, they only had to ask around 25. So what we can conclude from this is, people are twice as persuasive as they think they are. And interestingly, when she asked people to estimate how many people they would have to email in order to raise some amount of money, they underestimated the number by about half. So we're much more persuasive in person than we are by things like email, and we tend to overestimate how persuasive we are through social media. People really do want to say yes when you ask them a favor. And basically, when you ask for a donation, that's what it is. You're asking someone to do a favor. And how do people feel about someone after they do them a favor? That's the question that Stanford psychologist John Jecker wanted to answer. So he set up an experiment where subjects took part in a contest where they won a little bit of money, around $10. The thing was rigged, everybody won. And after the contest was done and the subjects had bag their winnings, one of three things happened depending on what group you're in. Some of them were approached by John, the researcher, and asked, he said, I'm embarrassed by this, but I need that money for gas. I don't have enough gas money to get home. I'm going to have to ask you that $10 back. Others were approached by another member of the department and they were asked for the money back. They said something like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm the psychology department secretary and John wasn't supposed to give that money away, so I'm going to have it back." And then people in the third group they just got to keep their winnings. And then they filled out a questionnaire. And one of the questions was, how much on a scale of 1 to 10 do you like the researcher? Did you like John? And who do you think it was that liked the researcher more? Was it the people who were asked by the researcher for the money back? The people who were asked by someone else for the money back? Or was it the people who got to keep the money? Intuitively, you would think that the people who got to keep the money were the ones who liked John the most. But it turns out that people who were asked by John for his money back were the ones that liked him the most, the ones who felt like they did him a favor. And psychologists call this the Ben Franklin effect. When we do someone a favor, we end up liking them more. And this name comes from when in the 1730s, Ben Franklin asked a bitter political enemy to loan him a book. And his enemy did that. And Franklin wrote afterwards that now this guy started speaking to him for the first time, and his attitude towards Franklin completely changed for the better. So, how do psychologists explain this? Um, in psychology, there's something called self-perception theory. It says that your attitudes are shaped by observing your own behavior and trying to make sense of it. So, if we only do favors for people we like, if we're doing a favor for someone, it must be because we like them. And by the way, it's Katrina and our experience that only if someone really dislikes you will they say no. Otherwise, they'll help you out and end up feeling better about you as well. So, the takeaway for nonprofits is this. Making requests from our supporters, it's not some kind of a zero-sum game. Every act of support can increase supporters' positive attitudes about your organization if you acknowledge them appropriately and you recognize them. So, what do we know about why people stop supporting nonprofit organizations? About 6 years ago, the National Awareness, Attitudes, and Usage Study surveyed 98,000 donors who'd previously given $250 to $2,500 a year to cultural institutions, so museums, symphonies, and so forth. And then they had stopped donating for at least 24 months. So this makes them the so-called lapsed donors. And the two most common reasons for discontinuing being a donor were the first was they weren't acknowledged or thanked for a previous gift. And then the second was they weren't asked to donate again. The last reason they gave was what they called solicitation overreach. They were asked too often. So people said they stopped giving because they weren't asked to donate again 4 times more often than those who were asked too often to donate. So our takeaway from this is, supporting your mission strengthens our supporters' affinity with the organization.
All right, so you're a leadership volunteer, and Otis has helped you understand that by asking for donations from people, you actually are going to improve your relationship with that person. They will like you better. There's probably a little bit of psychology around the fact that you've improved your personal brand. It's like taking a puppy to the park. People just like you better when they know you're a good person. And by soliciting for missions like yours, they know you're a good person. The other thing that you're doing, which is really important, is that you are helping to build a community around your mission. And that is super important, not just to the mission, but to the people that you're bringing in. Studies show time and time again that by bringing people into a community, they are happier and they are healthier. And you get to do that for them. So when you ask for a donation, if they say no, no biggie, but you've already accomplished something. You've delivered a message with perfect credibility that your mission is important because you're perfectly credible. You've done a lot of work just by asking. And when they say yes, you've done even more good work by bringing them into your community and you've improved your relationship with them. So, with that, let's close it up. Thank you so much and go forth and ask.